In the 21st century, those who change the world are those who change the culture. They get people in sync, lead tribes, create movements, and generate an energy field where ordinary people achieve extraordinary results.
Everybody deals with stress and trauma differently, and there's no right or wrong. Some people are in go mode and some people are in panic mode, and we can't criticize the people who are shutting down. We have to just be there for them and be patient with them. And we have to lean on the people who are in go mode for now. We also have to ask our team to look out for each other. We have to ask our team to check on each other, that especially if someone lives alone, to make sure that we all remember them and check in on them. And at the end of the day, the leader has to remember that the cause that they're hoping to advance is bigger than anything or anyone in the company, and the importance of saving everyone's job is more important than saving one person's job. And we have to try and maintain a broad, long-term view, despite the fact that the stresses are immediate and short-term.
I'm Aga Bayer, and this is the Culture Lab podcast, where you will find ideas and inspiration on how to harness the power of team and organizational culture. I talk to leadership thinkers, culture experts, entrepreneurs, and all sorts of movers and shakers, and together we explore the fascinating topic of culture, leadership, and personal growth. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Or better yet, write a review on iTunes and share the podcast with your followers and friends on social media. For more, check out our archive at www.agabayer.com/podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 59 of the Culture Lab podcast. Apart from our regular episodes, we've been posting bonus episodes that we call the Culture Lab audio postcards. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to them and that you will share them with friends, colleagues, and family members, anyone who might benefit from a little bit of guidance, a little bit of inspiration, and an occasional kick in the butt. Because I think we all need some help to stay sane and to navigate this pandemic in the best possible way. And that's what the postcards are all about. Okay, so let me tell you who my guest today is. He's someone who certainly needs no introductions. Simon Sinek is a self-proclaimed unshakable optimist. And he continues to believe in a bright future and in our ability to build it together. He's probably best known for popularizing the concept of why. But since his first TED Talk that has been viewed by over 50 million people, he's written 5 best-selling books. And the most recent one, The Infinite Game, is one of my favorites. So given the current circumstances, our conversation circles around the current challenges of the coronavirus, but we also chat about other things, about his books, about leadership, and about culture. I really hope you enjoy it, and if you do, please share with others who might find it useful as well. Simon, welcome to the Culture Lab.
Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you as a guest. And normally I would start this interview slightly differently, but I want us to kick off with what's on everyone's mind right now, the current pandemic and the impact that it has had so far. So what patterns are you seeing when interacting with leaders and entrepreneurs these days? What are the things that are noteworthy or just surprising to you?
I think, as expected in times of sudden change, there's two primary reactions. Some people are shutting down and in panic and can't see the forest for the trees, and others see amazing opportunity and see the chaos, that see light in the chaos. So it's been really sort of amazing to engage with people who are on both sides. Those who when they talk, it's as if it's never going to change, and this is, are we going to survive? Are we going to survive? Even though their businesses absolutely could survive, and others who are seeing a remarkable opportunity, even though their businesses might completely go under. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? And I know that you are certainly on the side of people who
try to see an opportunity in all this. And it's interesting because I've heard many people use the word unprecedented when talking about this crisis. And when you talked to your team on the issue of coronavirus, I saw it on YouTube, you told them that there is absolutely nothing that is unprecedented about this, and that this crisis can be an opportunity. So my question to you is, what is it that we can do as entrepreneurs, leaders, and team members to make sure that this crisis doesn't go to waste? Is there a way to emerge stronger on the other side, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, what is unprecedented is that most of us have never lived through a global pandemic before. We've had epidemics in nations. We had Ebola across a large part of Africa, but we've never had a global pandemic before. That is absolutely unprecedented. But what is not unprecedented is a sudden change in technology or culture or politics that throws business into chaos. It's happened in industries, and it's happened across all of business. The internet threw a lot of businesses into chaos. It didn't happen so suddenly. What's so different about this is that it's very, very sudden. But any kind of new technological advancement challenges old business models. The internet put a lot of companies out of business, but it also produced remarkable opportunity. And so what I've tried to remind my team is that change in a business world, we've dealt with this before. This is more sudden. This is definitely more jarring, but we know how to do this. And so I've tried to get them to focus focus forwards, and instead of trying to figure out how we're going to keep doing what we were always doing, to start thinking about, okay, how will we do things differently now that the world is different? And so it's about shifting one's mindset. It's about shifting one's perspective that allows us to see opportunity. This is Viktor Frankl stuff. We cannot control the circumstances around us. All that we can control is our attitude. And if we can't control the world around us, we can if we can't change the world around us, we can change ourselves. So it's a matter of perspective.
Absolutely. And I want us to dive deeper into this area of attitude and how people show up in situations like that. In your book, Leaders Eat Last, you mention a terrorist attack on Taj Mumbai Hotel in 2008. And on the day when the attack took place, the hotel employees, they really gave customer service a whole new meaning, because basically they made the choice to rescue guests when they could have saved themselves. And today we see extraordinary acts of courage and commitment, not just from the health workers around the globe, but also from all frontline employees who risk their health, if not their lives, to serve the public. So I want your perspective on what makes people so committed to have such a high sense of duty, and what can organizations do to emulate that? Because I think that sense of duty and that sense of commitment is also necessary to open our minds to a different way of doing things.
If you talk to anyone in the military, how do they do what they do? How can they run to difficult situations and face probable death? They'll all tell you that they don't do it for God or country. They do it for the person to the left of them and the person to the right of them. It's about trust and culture. And it's the same for all of us. Courage is not some internal thing necessarily where you dig down deep and find the courage. It's external. The reason we have the courage to jump out of an airplane is because of the parachute on our back. It's the external thing that gave us the courage to leap. And it's the same here. The organizations where there's the most courage, you're going to see camaraderie. You're going to see love amongst the people. You're going to see people caring and worrying about each other. Those are the ones where you'll find the most courage. Organizations that have not invested in culture and leadership and trust over the years, then it really does rely on just the small teams and groups of people and the feelings of responsibility.
Yeah, it's a really important point, isn't it? And I've seen this doing rounds of the internet recently, this saying, I don't know who said that originally, that crisis doesn't shape character, it reveals character. And I think a lot of organizations found themselves in a situation where they are simply not prepared to face this crisis because they haven't made the investment that you have just talked about. So what do you do when you find yourself in this situation and suddenly it's a wake-up call? Is there a way to build trust again in such difficult circumstances like we're facing right now?
Oh, it is. I mean, ideally, you want to do it during the good times, but of course, it's possible to do it now, and it starts with extreme honesty. For a leader to come out and say, "I realize that the way we've run our business for the past 10 years really was too short term, too finite minded, and I realize too often we sacrifice the people, and I realize the damage that we've done that now we're paying the price for," and to genuinely believe and genuinely say, I take responsibility for that and realize this crisis has revealed to me the error of my ways. And now is time for change. I wish I did this sooner. I wish I had this realization sooner, but better late than never. And truly, truly commit to the path of worrying about and taking care of the people, and doing that openly and out loud. So it will require an expression of extreme vulnerability, which would not have been required if they'd been doing this for years. But it requires an expression of extreme vulnerability to try and set the ship on the right path.
Yeah. And what resonated with me, particularly in what you have said, is that this crisis has revealed some things to us. So I'm curious, what has this crisis revealed for you about your organization, or even about yourself as a leader?
It's true. Crisis is the great revealer of truth. I've been so impressed by the folks on my team, where we are flexing into a space that we're not used to. We made most of our income from live events. Well, can't do that anymore. Yeah. And it's been kind of an incredible thing to watch the team flex multiple times, because, everything's been going so quickly that we headed in one direction and realized that we couldn't do that. So we pivoted it again, and the team has been taking it. It's been kind of amazing. So I've really been impressed with the team's ability to change under very, very tight deadlines.
Existential flexing. We'll speak about this a little bit later, because I'd like us to talk about your new book, obviously. But before we leave the topic of Corona, just one more question. Many companies, as you know, have been forced to work differently. For a lot of them, it means moving entirely to remote working. So what do you think about certain leadership qualities that might be particularly important to cultivate a healthy virtual culture?
Well, good leadership is good leadership, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. And fundamentally, leadership is a human exercise. It's the concern and worry about real human beings as human beings. And so in this virtual world, it's not just about having Zoom calls where we go through the numbers. It's about taking time to call people up individually and just check in on them and give them an opportunity to vent or cry or scream or just talk without any judgment, and let them know that there's a safe space and that you care about them as a human being. I think that's a really important part of leadership right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, ideally, we would have cultivated these qualities before this happens. I think for people who haven't made displays of vulnerability early on, or haven't been particularly empathetic, this is a very challenging time, because suddenly those qualities are even more important than ever, and it definitely puts them completely out of the comfort zone. So if someone is a leader who's not really comfortable with all that stuff, and they hope that they could go through their career avoiding asking people, how are you doing? And maybe witnessing someone cry, what advice do you have for them?
Well, you better learn fast. That's like saying, I want to be in a healthy marriage, but I'm uncomfortable, with somebody, I'm uncomfortable. I'm a bad listener, or I'm uncomfortable somebody expressing their emotions. Well, it's not going to go well. The advice that I would give is put yourself on a steep learning curve and dig down deep and find the humanity inside yourself, that if it's uncomfortable for you, it's even more uncomfortable for them. And your willingness to put yourself through your own discomfort gives permission for other people to feel uncomfortable too, which is really the greatest gift you can give someone. So a leader's willingness to be to face their own vulnerabilities and their own discomfort and sit in that discomfort allows other people to do the same. And that's about the best thing you can do as a leader.
Oh, I love that. And I really want to underscore that. So pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone and going where it's uncomfortable for us gives others permission to do the same. And it
Exactly.
really is probably really the biggest gift that we can give people today, because a lot of people feel incredibly uncomfortable. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so let's talk about your new book, The Infinite Game. But first, I want to ask you about your grandma. Why did you dedicate The Infinite Game to her?
She lived, it's just as I said in the dedication, she lived with an infinite mindset. She was up for anything, and she saw life as the most wonderful adventure. She lived her life in a way that should be a model for the rest of us as well.
I love that. I think she was similar to my grandma. It's awesome. So for those of our listeners who haven't had a chance to read your book yet, what is an infinite game, and why do we need an infinite mindset now, probably more than ever?
In the 1980s, a philosopher by the name of James Carse articulated these two types of games, finite games and infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective, like football. There's always a beginning, middle, and end, and if there's a winner, there has to be a loser. Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means new players can join the game at any time. The rules are changeable, which means you can play however you want. And the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. One of the challenges we have is we are players in infinite games every day of our lives. There's no such thing as being number one in your marriage. There's no such thing as winning global politics. And there's definitely no such thing as winning business. But if we listen to the language that so many leaders use, they talk about being number one, being the best, or beating their competition. Based on what? Based on what agreed upon objectives, what agreed upon timeframes, and what agreed upon metrics. In other words, we can't win in a game that has no finish line. And this is the problem. When we play to win in a game that has no end, there's a few very predictable and consistent outcomes: the decline of trust, the decline of innovation, and the decline of cooperation. Business is an infinite game, but the problem is too many of us are building our companies and leading with a finite mindset, trying to win in a game that has no end.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons that this happens is that businesses are faced with certain milestones and limited resources. And so I wanted to share with you a question that someone asked me recently. And just to give you and our listeners a little bit of context, it comes from a purpose-driven startup that is currently trying to secure more investment and launch its business. And I'm sharing it with you, Simon, because I feel like it represents a dilemma that a lot of organizations struggle with when it comes to adopting an infinite mindset. So this is what he says. Can we or should we place some values on the back burner in order to assure we build a sustainable business? If so, when and how do we deliberately return to our original vision? And how many rivers can we cross before it's too late to turn back? What would you say?
That's like asking me if I want to be healthy, can I eat chocolate cake? I mean, yes. But you really want to do it very, very sparingly. This is, when it comes to taking funding, first of all, you should never violate your values. You should never violate your values. And if you make compromises for the short term, just understand that everything comes at a cost. And the question is it worth the cost? Right? I mean, I think to violate one's values is about the worst thing you can do. But I hear this all the time from startups where they say, look, we have this vision, but we needed the money, so we took the money. And then what ends up happening is they end up with investors who don't care about their vision and put unbelievable pressure on them to keep doing the expedient thing. And they can never, ever, ever get back to the purpose that they set out to. I think you have to be stubborn about your purpose. I make a joke about chocolate cake, but this is not chocolate cake. This is about our very values. It's the thing that define us as to who we are. That's like saying, I believe in integrity, but is it okay to lie now and then if it helps me get rich? Well, no, it's not okay. These questions are very short-term focused, because if we go down that path, then we give permission to all of our employees to violate our values now and then because it helps meet the numbers. Yeah. And you're setting up a very, very, very slippery slope. Mm-hmm. So I think I would rather take less money from an investor that believes in me and my cause than take more money from an investor that's just looking for a return. And look at the business models of the investors, because a lot of investors all say the right things up front and they all say they believe in the cause. But if their business model is to have a liquidity event in 3 to 5 years, then you're going to be feeling pressure from them in 3 to 5 years. And the pressure they're going to put on you is to make the thing look pretty so they can sell it, not necessarily build a great business that's cause driven.
Yeah.
So I think that if no, do it differently is what I would say. Stick to your values. It's the only thing you've got. Money will come and go. The values are the only thing you've got. And if you lose those, you lose the people, you lose the loyalty, you lose the trust, and you're faced to look at yourself in the mirror the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a difficult decision to make. And I think that people fall into that trap of seeing their situation as some sort of shade of gray. So it's never black or white. It's just, yeah, we'll do this thing. Maybe it's not entirely aligned with our mission, but it can earn us some money. So let's do this for a couple of months until we have a runway long enough for our business to launch or whatever.
And if you do that, remember, like I would, so for example, I used to have huge fights with my business partner years ago because I would turn down business. Like we were bootstrapping it and we had no money, and he would get so mad at me that I would turn down business. And I would say, because we don't want to work with a company like that, you know? Now, it's different from an investor where you have a lifelong relationship with them, or at least a relationship for many years that'll have far-reaching impact. But, you know, but if we really needed money, would I accept doing business with a client that I didn't have total alignment with now and then? Yes, absolutely. But I went into it with eyes wide open, knowing that this was going to be hell. This was not going to become some long-term relationship. And I was just doing it for the short-term sugar rush, but then it would be over and I wouldn't be kidding myself. But the point is those relationships ended very quickly. So I think there's a big difference between doing business with a client and doing business with an investor. Because an investor becomes part of your family. That's a marriage, you know?
Absolutely.
A client is much more short-term.
Totally. And, you know, even with the clients, because I've had these experiences myself as well, you end up regretting taking on the project.
Almost always.
Right?
That's the irony.
Almost always. Yeah.
Almost always. You start to think to yourself, this wasn't worth the money.
Yeah, exactly. I had this experience. So absolutely, I agree. Okay. So circling back to COVID just for a second. So how would you recommend leaders balance immediate crisis and the well-being of their teams and making decisions with an infinite mindset? Because I think that for many people, these two things might be in conflict.
I think we have to accept that it's imperfect, that everybody deals with stress and trauma differently, and there's no right or wrong. Some people are in go mode and some people are in panic mode, and we can't criticize the people who are shutting down. We have to just be there for them and be patient with them. And we have to lean on the people who are in go mode for now. We also have to ask our team to look out for each other. We have to ask our team to check on each other, that especially if someone lives alone, to make sure that we all remember them and check in on them. And at the end of the day, the leader has to remember that the cause that they're hoping to advance is bigger than anything or anyone in the company. And the importance of saving everyone's job is more important than saving one person's job. And we have to try and maintain a broad long-term view, despite the fact that the stresses are immediate and short-term. And again, it's about reinvention, which is we still have to pivot and work very hard to produce things in the short term, but it should always be with the hope that we're reinventing the business model for the long term, that we're taking short-term steps for something that will ultimately survive and thrive afterwards. It's not just for now, but it's actually for the long term.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and it goes back to. I promise that we'll circle back to existential flexibility, and I wanted to ask you whether you had to stretch yourself and test your flexibility right now, and whether you had to take some drastic decisions in your business, and maybe not necessarily now, but generally. And then, how did you do it in a way that was respectful and at the same time enabled you to stay aligned with what's really important? Because for a lot of people, you know, just to be completely direct, what I'm thinking about, I know that a lot of leaders at the moment are faced with the prospect of perhaps having to lay people off and perhaps closing some business units. And those are super hard decisions. So tell us more about how do you take these decisions with a clear conscience and knowing that you are doing the right thing?
So, we absolutely are going through our own existential flex right now. The business model that we had will not survive. And if we try and just double down on our old business model and try and do, keynote speeches, online,
Yeah.
then we'll go out of business and everyone will lose their job. So we have to pivot. And we're finding new ways to bring our cause to life through online courses. We're going live with. We've been able to in about a week and a half to 2 weeks produce 11 courses that are going to go online, and we're realizing this is a great business model for the future, not just for now. Mm-hmm. And it's been an amazing stress, an amazing flex on the company to go through it, but it's been sort of hard, but also invigorating. For companies where the reality is that they cannot survive, it's not that layoffs are morally bad; it's how we do it that speaks to our values. I hope that we wait to the last minute to do the layoffs and we don't just do it. That's the first choice. We can cut people's salaries first. Better we should all suffer a little than anyone should have to suffer a lot. There are temporary furloughs that we can give unpaid vacation, but everybody still has a job. There's all kinds of schemes to do that can help us thrive. But if it comes to the business folding or to prevent bankruptcy, then the manner in which we do it speaks to our values. To do it with respect and hopefully give people a severance really matters. I know of one company that called 22 out of their 35 employees and in a 20-second phone call told them they have no jobs, gave them no severance, and it was effective immediately. As if the pandemic is not a shock enough, that's how they found out. But I know other companies that have been forced to let people go, but they've done it in such an honorable way that they've tried very, very hard to set people up to take care of themselves for as long as possible, even though the company wasn't able to provide it because there was no money left. Yeah. I also think this speaks to the way that we build our companies, which is, how good are we at saving money? Usually if we have a good year, we distribute all the earnings, we distribute all the profits to everybody, and everybody gets rich. And I'm a great believer that especially small businesses should keep at least a year of expenses in the bank at all time. So if something bad were to happen, you could survive for a year on savings. I'm a great believer in being very, very conservative and always keeping a year's worth of money in the bank.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. And I want us to talk a little bit about something that probably most of our listeners got to know you from, which is obviously the concept of why. I have to say that I still vividly remember the first time I saw your TED Talk. I was working in Hay Group, now Conferry at the time, and we were co-creating a leadership program with a Dutch organization called Better Future. And at some point, they suggested we show the Golden Circle video to our participants. And I saw it and I was like, wow, this is someone who we'll be hearing more of. So, I cannot not ask you this question. Tell us a little bit about what led you to that moment and how did you discover your why?
So it was pain that was the impetus. I had a small marketing business, a small marketing consultancy, and superficially everything was good. We had great clients. We did good work. We were well respected, but I didn't want to wake up and do it again. I hated going to work. And people gave me stupid advice, like, do what you love, like, well, I'm doing the same thing that I used to do and I don't love it anymore. And so I kept it all to myself. I kept that pain to myself. Most of my energy went into pretending that I was happier and more in control and more successful than I felt, which is really a terrible way to live. And it wasn't until a very close friend of mine came to me and said, I'm worried about you. Something's different. Something's wrong. Did I admit that I was struggling? And that cathartic experience freed up all of this energy that I could now look into finding a solution as opposed to lying, hiding, and faking every day. And the solution that I found was this biological imperative that every single one of us knows what we do. Some of us know how we do it, but very few of us can articulate why we do what we do. And I realized that was my problem. I didn't know why I was getting out of bed every morning. I could just tell you that I had a bunch of financial goals. That was it. And it forced me to go on a search. I hired someone to help me find my why, because, as I suggest, even today, it's very, very, very hard to do for yourself because we're not objective about ourselves. And I was able to put together words to describe my why, to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. And it set me on an entirely new course. I shared it with my friends. My friends started making big life changes. They would invite me to share it with their friends. And I would literally stand in someone's living room and give this talk about the why and help people find their why for $100 on the side.
Wow.
And people just kept inviting me and I just kept saying yes.
That's amazing. And so your why is to inspire people so that they do things that inspire them, right?
That's the goal, to inspire people to do the things that inspire them so that each of us can change our lives for the better.
I love that. And what is your vision? Because I know that you have a very inspiring vision as an organization as well. Can you share it with us?
Absolutely. We imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do.
That's amazing. And where are we, would you say, on a scale from 1 to 10? How close are we to experiencing that world?
Oh, we're probably about a 2. And we're probably going to be about a 2 for the next 100 years.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I understand that this is an infinite vision. Like we'll never get there, but we'll die trying. That's the point.
That's the point. Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
But I think that, I think where we used to be a 1 about 10 or 15 years ago. So, the way I view it is we're absolutely making progress. And what I'm excited about is the world is changing. People, when I started talking about this concept of why 13 years ago, talking about purpose at work, well, that was crazy talk. That was the stuff for hippies, and now it's perfectly acceptable to talk about being purpose driven out loud at work in serious companies. So, I mean, this is amazing progress. The fact that I have a career, which is embarrassing, I talk about trust and cooperation. There should be no demand for my work, but the fact that there is demand for me and people like me, folks like Brene Brown, Brene Brown talks about vulnerability. Are you crazy? But the fact that our work resonates with people means there's demand for this, means people want it, means people are experimenting with it. It means people are understanding the importance of culture and leadership. So I'm very, very optimistic that we're moving in the right direction, but I also understand that we're talking about an ideal and it's going to be a lifelong journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And my aim in asking you this question about where do you think you are is exactly that. I think that would be my estimation as well. And I think it's important to talk about, a vision doesn't have to be something that you believe you will be able to accomplish in your lifetime. This is not the point. This is just a direction in which you want to be able to move the needle towards. So I hope that for a lot of companies that are listening to this, maybe they will rethink what their vision is, because I hear way too often things like, we will be the best in the market or whatever, number one provider of blah, blah, blah. And clearly this is not what we're talking about.
Exactly right. And, at the end of the day, you can be number one every day you want because you get to decide the metrics, Like, I mean, I can just declare that I'm number one based on any metrics that I choose. Yeah. I mean, you see it all the time. I love looking at the fine print on advertising. It says best this, number one that, and it always looks down. It says based on, comparison with these kinds of companies over this time frame. So they pick the comparison and they pick the time frame.
Yeah, totally.
If you change the comparison, you change the time frame, all of a sudden you're number 10.
Totally. I probably am tuned into this because I'm working on my new book and I see a lot of bestsellers now, especially Amazon bestsellers. And then you realize that it was an Amazon bestseller for one day in one category, which basically doesn't mean anything, but people feel like they're number one. So that's great.
And you can game the system, right?
Yeah.
You can game the system. You can hire a company to make you a New York Times bestseller. All you have to do is get all your friends and everybody to buy Amazon does their algorithms every hour. So all you have to do is get everybody to buy your book for 1 hour.
Yeah.
And you can drive up the algorithm and you can be number one in some small category. And for the rest of your life, you can tell people I'm a number one Amazon bestseller, even though it was for an hour.
I'm glad that we demystified that. Thank you.
And but I think the good news is I think most customers are onto it. Like everybody already knows that not all the reviews on a book are real, because authors have their friends write reviews and give 5 stars to help drive up the star rating. I'm very proud of the fact that I never asked anybody to do that, for the reason that I actually wanted to know, did I write a good book or not? And if I game the system, I'll never know, And I always joke with people that if there's a book that has 5 stars, it's a bad book, because no book has 5 stars unless only your friends reviewed it, because people will always disagree or not like your book. All the best books are like 4.5 stars.
Yeah, totally. Catch-22, I think maybe it even has 3.5, which I think is an amazing book, right? So yeah, exactly.
Time for your questions.
Hi, Aga. This is Alison McTavish from Switzerland.
Hi, this is Dale Hintz. I'm submitting a question to the Culture Lab.
Hi, Aga. I just want to say thank you so much for doing the podcast.
I have a question for Culture Lab.
Hello, my name is Morten Abbey from Denmark.
Hi, Ed. This is Tim Coupler.
Hi, I'm Kostas. I have a question for you, Michael.
I'd love to hear your answer. Thank you.
Thanks for entertaining my question.
Hi, Simon. My name is Zina and I am from Cyprus. I would like to ask you, how can I successfully play the infinite game in an environment that has finite mindset and has been playing the finite game for decades? Thank you.
It's a good question, Zina. I get that one a lot. We cannot control that which we cannot control. And unfortunately, I hear this all the time. I understand what you're talking about, Simon, but senior leadership doesn't get it. Well, we can't control senior leadership. All we can control is ourselves. So the opportunity here is to be the leader you wish you had, which is you can still lead with an infinite mindset, and you can still take care of those to the left of you and the right of you, and lead your team the way it needs to be led. That doesn't mean that you have to have the rank or authority. You can still be the leader. And what you tend to find in those groups is those small teams or those divisions tend to outperform or start doing better than everybody else. They tend to have better morale and lower churn of employees. And so management either leaves you alone because you're doing well, or they look over and say, hey, what are you doing? We could learn. And eventually one of those people will get promoted or move out of the team to another group, and they'll take everything they've learned and they'll lead with an infinite mindset. And before you know it, the tail wags the dog. So having an infinite mindset means that we can actually have an impact in the company that will outlast any leader.
That's amazing. Thank you. And another question is from Sean.
Hey, Simon. I'm curious about what kind of environments are needed, especially now and going forward, for employees to show up and thrive. Thanks.
Now, most important, these circles of safety. We have to feel that the team is united. We have to feel that we care about each other as human beings, but we also have to be honest. Just being positive, saying everything's good, everything's fine is not true, and it's not helpful. But being optimistic, but being honest, like, this is hard, guys. And the only way we're going to get through this is if we work together. And if we work together, we will figure this out. And there's lots of clever techniques that we can do to invent the future. I know my friend Jennifer Waldman, she taught me something which we've done. It's been fantastic, which is we told all of our employees that they had to bring 15 ideas each to the table in 48 hours on how we could, on things that we could do differently. 15 ideas in 48 hours for every single person. And people thought that was crazy. Why not just 3 or 4 ideas? Because if I only tell people to bring 3 or 4 ideas, it's going to be all the same ideas, and it's going to be the same 3 or 4 ideas that I came up with. But it's when you get down to number 11 or 12 or 13 that it gets really hard and there's really good thinking. So, we asked our people to help us solve the problem. It wasn't just all coming from management.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so this is one super practical thing that everyone can do now. Ask your people to bring 15 ideas in 48 hours. And finally, we have Gary Turner.
Hi, Aga. Hi, Simon. Gary Turner here. Simon, what's been on your mind these days that you haven't had a chance to share with anybody yet?
That's a good question, Gary. The only thing that's been on my mind these days is going through the existential flex that I'm going through. We've been drinking through a fire hose, and the pace has been furious. But what I've been paying more attention to is human relationships, and my work is largely about human relationships, but this has really exaggerated the importance of them. These times have really exaggerated the importance of them. So That definitely is occupying a lot of my mind.
And finally, we have rapid fire questions. And the whole idea is that I will ask you 5 questions in rapid succession, and you'll aim to answer all these questions in under 2 minutes. Are you up for the challenge?
I mean, me giving a short answer, that's going to be a real challenge.
Well, let's go. How do you define organizational culture?
The culture is like the character of the person. We talk about the character of a human being. Well, that's what the culture is. It's the values we share. My friend George Flynn defines culture beautifully. He says a culture equals values plus behavior. I think that's a great definition.
Mm-hmm. And what is a sign, or perhaps signs in plural, that a company culture needs some work or perhaps even a major overhaul?
If people quit a lot or get fired a lot, that people don't want to stick around, there's no loyalty, that's a sign of a weak culture. Inconsistent performance is a sign of a weak culture when it goes up and down. Where you have only the leader who does all the talking and all the meetings, that's a sign of a weak culture. So there's lots of little signs.
And are there any companies that you admire for their culture? And if yes, why?
There's lots of companies I admire for their culture. Barry Waymiller, based in St. Louis, they don't talk about head counts; they talk about heart counts. They are really a remarkable organization that views their employees as human beings. If you ask Bob Chapman, the CEO, what does the company do? He says we build great people to do extraordinary things. Mm-hmm. He defines the company by the people, not by the product, which I absolutely love. Sweetgreen in the United States is this wonderful salad company that is all about sustainable and local, to the point where they have multiple farms providing for their shops. So the tomatoes you get in uptown New York may be different than the tomatoes you get downtown because it's a different farm providing them. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. And what books on culture or on leadership would you recommend? And by the way, if you haven't read all of the Simon's books, you have to. So that's my recommendation. But what books are you learning from?
I think Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is essential reading. Slightly more tactical, but a fantastic book is a book called How to Talk to Kids So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. It's a parenting book, but it's so good for learning communication. It's a great leadership book. It's a bright yellow book. That's a really important one too.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. What is one thing that our listeners can do tomorrow to build their own culture lab and start cultivating a culture that will help them and their teams to bring their vision to life?
Tomorrow you can pick up the phone and call people individually and say, how are you? How are you doing? And just listen.
Any closing remarks?
No, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to helping me share my message.
Thank you. And if our listeners would like to learn more about your work, certainly a good place to go to is Amazon and get your books. Where else would you advise people go and check you out?
All the usual places. SimonSinek.com has links to everything. And we have a lot of resources and classwork and online courses at SimonSinek.com. LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. We put a lot of stuff up on YouTube, all the usual places.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was a huge pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm Aga Bayer, the creator and host of the Culture Lab podcast. And this is the Culture Lab team.
Production Manager, Lindsay Nunez.
Art Director, Emily Spencer.
Aaron Scott, Content Editor.
Sound Producer, James Eade, Be Heard.
If you haven't subscribed to the Culture Lab yet, you can do it on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and many other places where podcasts are available. If you'd like to subscribe to my newsletter, The Culture Lab Insider, go to www.agabayer.com/podcast and scroll down to the very bottom of the page. That's www.agabayer.com/podcast. Also, we would be ever so grateful if you could rate and review our podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. And now it's time for the preview of the upcoming episode. And my next guest is one of my personal heroes, a woman I've held in a very high regard for many, many years, Amy Edmondson. She's a professor of leadership and management at the Harvard Business School and the godmother of psychological safety. In this short preview, Amy talks about what she means by a fearless organization.
It is absolutely fine to be afraid of missing a deadline, or afraid of harming a patient, or afraid of letting down a colleague. All of those things are okay. It's not okay to be afraid of each other. And it's not okay to be afraid of the boss. It's not okay to be afraid to speak up with work-relevant ideas that may or may not be on target, right? We've got to be willing to take those interpersonal risks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Culture Lab. If you found any moments that were interesting, inspiring, or maybe even game-changing, please share it with someone who'd appreciate it. After all, good ideas are meant to be shared.